The views expressed are our own and do not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense, Department of the Air Force, or the U.S. government. Our participation and appearance in any private or public events, sponsored or otherwise, or references, including external hyperlinks to non-federal entities, do not constitute or imply Department of Defense, Department of the Air Force, or U.S. government endorsement of any company or organization.
Morning, Colonel Over.
Morning, bud.
Good morning, Bet 630. How you doing this morning, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Had a little bit of technical difficulties with the mic over there, but we overcame and made it happen. So, um, I'm excited to have you on the podcast. This is awesome. I know a lot of other people are going to be pretty excited to hear what you had to say and get some insight from you, sir. So,
Yeah, we'll
see
see if
where we're
that's the
going with
case.
it.
I'm just excited to be here.
Yes,
So,
sir.
all right.
Set. Yes, sir. So I know people were asking. We want to kind of outline what we're going through today.
Okay.
So some of the stuff we're going to be covering is career choice and motivation, getting acquainted with the debt, leadership and experience, deployed life and insight, and then looking ahead.
Okay.
So those are some of the stuff we're going to be going over. But let's get right into it. So first question we have for you is why did you choose to pursue a career in the Air Force, and what initially drew you to military service?
Okay. So there are a couple things that drew me to military service. The one, and probably the one that influenced me the most was my father. My dad was enlisted in the Navy for 23 years. He was somebody I always looked up to, and I knew from a young age I was going to follow in his footsteps and go in the military. Um, the Air Force was never really in the picture. My mom was bound and determined that I was going to college. I wasn't going to follow in those footsteps. But I went to college, I got my degree, and I still wanted to enlist. And my dad pushed me to the Air Force because he said that the Air Force treats their people better. And if I was not going to go officer, I should enlist in the Air Force. My grandfather was Army Air Corps. There's a long line of service, and I knew that I wanted to serve something bigger than myself, right? Um, so I wanted to serve the country. I wanted to work with people that had the same ideals as me, and basically I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps. So I enlisted. I was turning wrenches. I was happy.
Yes,
So,
sir.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
saw that you did 4 years as a jet mechanic, right?
yeah.
Initially, and then you went to college, and then
Nope.
or did
Nope.
you do college
I
jet
did
mechanic
I
and
did
then
college and then
aviation?
enlisted. There was never a desire to be an officer because there's nothing wrong with being enlisted. I loved it, and actually, it's still hard for me for this to this day, right? Because when you tear down and build up an engine, you can see where you are, where you're a finished product, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
still rough sitting behind a desk or putting together paperwork and everything. You never really know where you are at any given time and if you're getting something accomplished. So that's just been my take on it. I know others are fine with it, but it's frustrating
Yes, sir.
at
Trying to get through
times.
that mound of
Yeah,
paperwork,
yeah,
and you can't just keep stacking up, doesn't
yeah.
it?
Success is measured on the emails that you send. Sometimes it's weird.
Yes,
So
sir. Yes, sir. So what made you make that leap from enlisted to officer?
okay, so open kimono. When I was enlisted, I ran across a bunch of officers, and the maintenance officers are a different breed. They're good people, just like any career field. There's good and there's bad people. Unfortunately, at the time at Langley, we had what I consider, and looking back on it still to this day, after being in the officer career field, was a bad leader. It was an individual that did not take care of the people, um, made some decisions that I thought were bad. And I think maybe that lieutenant was influenced by senior NCOs as well that were leading that LT astray. So because I had a bachelor's degree and because some people had tried to force me to cross over, I thought that maybe if I crossed over, I could do a little bit more good helping people if I
Mm-hmm.
had a higher level of influence. Um, that's not the case as a lieutenant. You don't have much influence as a
Yes, sir.
lieutenant. But I thought there had to be a counterbalance to
Mm-hmm.
the officers out there that were kind of, I'll use a word that I think is overused, toxic.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes personalities just don't mesh, but there has to be a counterbalance to toxic leadership to an extent. That's not probably the textbook Big Blue Air Force
Hmm.
answer for why anybody joins, but that is why I made the decision to cross over so that I could influence more and help more people.
Interesting, and that's something we had a Major Patrick on last week. He's a Marine, a retired major, and he kind of said the same thing. The same thing. Theme was doing it not for yourself, but to make a difference for in other people's lives. Right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's more of a selfless act to take a leadership role. I would think.
I don't want to pat myself on the back and say it was
Hmm.
a selfless act because it helped me and it helped my family as well, right?
Hmm.
So every decision that you make is more for your wife, your kids, your family at home. But you have to remember that the Air Force, the people that you work with, that's your family as well,
That
right?
makes
And
sense.
you have to be there to support them, just like we support anybody in this debt that comes in. Yeah, you have to take the time, give them the time, and being in the position that I'm in now, it affords me that opportunity to take care of people in the way that I think that they need to be taken care of. That doesn't always mean doing the
Hmm.
positive thing for them. Sometimes, people aren't
Yeah.
right for the military, and you have to kind of show them
Yeah.
other
Exactly.
venues, but doing the right thing that's best for them.
Yeah, yeah, I know that's something we talked about at field training too. Was that moral courage aspect too? I think is a big part of leadership. And that podcast last week, I keep bringing it up, but we had another situation where we talked about moral courage, and sometimes you got to make the right decision, but it's hard to make. So,
Yeah, yep. And there's avenues on that too as well. So, for instance, I'll bring up something that happened while I was here. We had an individual that was working in the local economy here, and one of the um, civilians was getting aggressive with a female. He stepped in, did the right thing. Uh, Altercation took place, and per our books, like anytime law enforcement's involved, it's supposed to be a CI, right? Well, a
hmm.
CI, um, I think it's civil investigation. I'm still trying to learn the acronyms.
Yeah.
I've been here 3 months. Forgive me. But a CI per the 2011, even a Category 5 says that you should consider a CE, which is a negative mark in the record. And then if you read the 2011, it's it's any negative interaction with law enforcement. Well, it's not a negative interaction, so we didn't process the CI because the decision was made. Basically, my decision that I can't preach to you guys to do the right thing in a situation and then have negative impacts to you when it happens. It will stop you in the future from doing the right thing.
Hmm.
So that's where the courage comes in. And as you guys progress in your career field and get into those positions where you have to make those decisions, right? Sometimes you have to buck the letter of the law because you're trying to instill, hey, you have to do the right thing in certain situations, which this individual absolutely did.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
So,
And it's I've seen that too. Even getting and growing into a leadership role is that like everything's millimeter shifts a little bit too. It's not so much like you can't be on one side of the spectrum making a decision or on the other side of the spectrum making a
yeah,
decision. You got to say, well, let's look at this from a human aspect, not so much logical. Sometimes you can't just solve everything logically. So,
yeah. And you're governed by
hmm.
AFIs and the
Of course.
UCMJ, but I mean, the UCMJ is pretty cut and dry. That's not anything in this instance. But I had a commander tell me, and it changed my entire outlook on everything. He was a good dude. He said for every regulation, there's an equal and opposite waiver. He's like
Sure.
you just have to find it. So
Absolutely. So, and that brings us into our next question is what motivated you to choose Air Battle Manager as your career field, and how has that decision shaped your career?
so again, when I went to cross over, there were rated boards and non-rated boards, and the rated boards had the highest selection rate. And at the time,
Hmm.
ABM was 100% acceptance.
Really?
Yeah. So when I was in college, when I went to Penn State, I worked two jobs. I had a terrible GPA. I had to get the GPA waiver, which means you have to score high enough on the AFOQT to even get the waiver. And that was a combined score of just the three, not nav and pilot.
Yeah.
So I was able to get the waiver, and I picked ABM. Did a little bit of research into it. It seemed like a cool job, and it was an outstanding job. I really liked it a lot. But I kind of went in blind and just picked what would get me in the door in order to affect the change that I wanted to as an officer. And that's why I put it at the top of my list. It ended up being working out because I wouldn't have been able. I don't have depth perception,
Mm-hmm.
so a flight class three or a class three flight physical doesn't require depth perception. Although it depends on which.
Yeah.
When I flew with the Navy, I had depth perception. When I flew with the Air Force, I didn't. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
It was two
Different
different tests.
standards.
Well, it's different standards. It was different tests. So the Air Force has you do the one where you look into the machine,
Mm-hmm.
and the Navy gives you glasses and they hold up a card. And for some reason, the one with the card was easier. I could actually tell which ones were sticking out, and which ones weren't. So when I flew with the Navy, I had depth perception. When I fly with the Air Force, I don't. It's a funny
That's
thing.
funny.
But ABM and there were great people in that career
Mhm.
field, and ended up being a great career field. Um, and it is a vastly changing career field right now. So
Okay. I've heard that it's going through a lot of changes, especially getting new airframes, and
mhm.
then on top of that, as far as the role goes now, is the role changing as far as with with the changing battle space?
The positions on the jet are changing because of the capabilities of the wedge tail that's coming online. I don't know what Tinker or what Tyndall is doing as far as the training pipeline for the way that it looks now. It used to take we could fit anywhere from 38 to 40 individuals on that plane, depending on how many seats there were. There were different variants that had two seats taken out because of upgrade, but it took anywhere from when we deployed, we'd have 15 to 18 people on a crew because that's how many people it took to run it. But the fidelity of the upgrade to the E3G, which is 4045, and the E7, I'm told that the E7 can run the mission with like 5 to 6 people.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
So that's definitely a substantial
yeah.
cut in manpower there.
So I don't think that the ABM career field is still going to be command and control. It's still going to be a jack of all trades, and bringing sensors together and bearing weight on the enemy. But I think it's going. I don't know how internally they're going to run the crew positions going
Hmm.
forward. I know what the old crew positions were on the E3, but I don't know how that's going to look on the wedge tail.
Yeah, they might have some reorganization
Yeah,
there with new equipment coming on
yeah,
board, and then yeah, probably looking at the mission and uh, definitely reshaping that. And then I know I've talked to some people and they're curious about your career and how it's progressed as far as you said you've gone to Top Gun and then you've worked with special forces operators too. I know a lot of people are very interested in a couple of those points in your career.
yeah. So not special force, special warfare. So special
Special warfare,
warfare,
okay.
yeah. So special forces. I did work with JSOC and USOC out at Bragg a little bit, but I was never in JSOC or USOC. Special warfare, so the TACP community. Uh, TACP community is awesome. If anybody gets a chance to work with those guys, I highly recommend it. A lot of high speed individuals, very athletic, very knowledgeable on munitions, weapon systems, and all that stuff because they have to be right. They're out there in the dirt and the muck and just doing the job. Their career field's going through a lot of changes right now as well because they're trying to keep up with the transition to fifth gen and everything that's going on. But yeah, special warfare. Yeah, my career's been all over the place: Army, Navy, Air Force, a lot of joint interaction. Um, there's a lot of talk, and you all might hear this when you become lieutenants about a golden path.
Hmm.
Uh, I try to get that out of your mind right now. There's no golden path, right? Just do whatever you want to do throughout your career, what's going to make you happy. Um, those opportunities will arise. Don't ever think that you have to do something in order to step up to the next tier or do well in your career, because if you go to a job that you don't really want to go to because you think it's going to further your career, in my opinion, your temperament's not going to be there. Your attitude's not going to be there. You're not going to be happy and you're not going to be 100% into the job, right? So you're not going to perform as well.
That makes
Whereas,
sense.
yeah, whereas if you go to what you want to do, which ALO, I wanted to do it. I wanted to do something a little bit more hands on the ground, working with those guys. And then out at Fallon, uh, controlling a Top Gun or flying with the Navy was a good time. So I got lucky. I had great mentors. I had great people pushing me. Loaf Bailey, Digger Shelton, Slash White. Like these are all individuals that have. I mean, Slash White. I outrank Slash White, and she has helped me more than anybody throughout my career because she's been a great influence and she's one of the smartest individuals I met.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah. So
Is she a Navy controller then, or is she
no,
a
she's
Air Force?
Air Force, and she is a Top Gun graduate and also a Air Force weapons school graduate, and she taught out at the Air Force weapons school for a long time. She was prior enlisted weapons director. I think she made it to E7, and it was funny
Oh
because
wow.
yeah, it was funny because she was an enlisted instructor down at Tyndall when I went through, and then she crossed over and became an ABM. And then when I was an instructor at the 966, she came through, and so I was teaching her. Which,
Oh really?
yeah, it was a weird situation, but
That is
yeah,
pretty weird.
we all those people I've deployed with, all those people are just great influences on me, and there's a hand I can count on one hand the amount of people that I trust enough that if I disagree with their decision, I'll still do it. And
Mhm.
those three people are them. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
And it's all about those connections you
yeah,
meet in the Air Force too, and that's probably what just keeps people in. I know that's one of my favorite parts about coming in and out of the debt is just like you said, high speed individuals, people that see eye to eye, level with you, and you can trust them. So.
yeah. Now we didn't always see eye to eye. So yeah, we all three of those individuals we didn't need to, but it turned out they were right and I was wrong, and
Mhm.
I'm all right admitting that. So
Absolutely. And then I got a question for you too with being out there with JSOC and the special warfare guys. Were you out in the muck and dirt with them and in the tents or?
yeah, we would go out in the tents with them. I never deployed with them in that capacity. However, I did in 2017. I took a trip with a buddy of mine, a 22 driver bullet shell horse. Again, another dude, probably a guy
Mhm.
on one hand. Uh, we went up to Raqqa to see Task Force, and there's a funny story from that. So they were all task force guys. They were all in civilian clothes. We were in the jock, and they were calling in strikes. And it was me, Bullet, and I can't remember the other guy's name. Saved my life. It'll probably come to me here in a little bit. He's a good guy though, good dude. But he dipped. Bullet and I didn't dip. This
Yeah.
was back before Zen. This is back before Zen. I think really came in. I think Zen might have been around then, but he dipped. And up at Raqqa in Syria, they got I think a delivery once every 2 to 3 weeks, and they would run out of dip. So we were sitting in the jock and we were looking at all the television screens, all the predator feeds, and he pulls out his dip and he's looking at him and he starts tapping it, and that floor goes
Feeling
completely
rationing it.
silent, and they're all looking at him and he's like, do y'all want some? And they're like, yes. So he throws it to everybody in the room. He's like, I got three more in my bag, hang
Just
on.
like
So
a bunch of wild
yeah,
animals jumped on it.
so he went back to the trailer that we were staying in, and he got all of them and handed them out, and he was like, here, I can get more when I go back,
That's
you guys.
awesome.
Yeah. So
Oh man, that sounds like some good times there. So, and you said the F-22 driver, you were working with him in the command center.
well,
How?
so him and I were actually, he was my boss
Oh really?
at Al Dhafra. We worked in weapons and tactics. He was the chief of weapons and tactics. I was a deputy chief. And one of the things that we wanted to do is go to. We went to Erbil. We went to Baghdad. We went to Raqqa. We wanted to see the ground operators, the TACPs, and the
Mm.
task force guys because they were doing a lot of close air support for them, and they wanted to know how they could help. Um, so we went up there to develop TTPs and establish better relationships with them so that when we were supporting CAS, whether it be from the E3 as a command and control station or from the F-22 as one of the aircraft in the rack and stacker and the RAS, what do they need from
Oh
us?
wow. So
So
there's a lot of opportunities like as a rated individual to cross on over and do some work with some ground troops and
yeah,
some guys. Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, and that wasn't something that we had to do. That was something that him and I looked at each other and we talked to leadership and they said, "Hey, we need to get," because we weren't on in crew billets. We were still flying, but we didn't fly as much because we weren't
Hmm.
crew dogs at the time. We were basically, like I said, weapons and tactics, just developing TTPs, working with the AOC and everything. And um, we said, hey, we think that this trip might be worth it. So we took 2 weeks and we went all throughout Iraq and Syria to talk to these guys. And we were in the green zone. We were up in Syria, um, on the ground, talking to them, seeing what they go through, just to get a better understanding of what they're going through. Because at 30,000 feet, at 40,000 feet, you're not really understanding the danger
Exactly.
that they're living in on the ground.
And then probably vice versa too, where they could get to know you more and kind of understand from that perspective too, to where what they can do might be able to help you accomplish the mission a little bit better. And
Yeah, I'd like to think that, but in
but
their
it's probably
mind, they're all badasses.
yeah.
They don't really
I don't think
care.
they really need you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I mean we might as well skip ahead a little bit
Okay.
and put in talk about the deployed life. I know we're already touching on it now, so um, I know we just talked about some experiences, but do you have any more memorable experiences from your time deployed? How have these experiences influence your leadership style and approach to mentoring cadets?
So every deployment has been fun. That in my opinion, that's where you learn the most and that's where you build the most relationships, right? You're constantly with those individuals 24/7. Being a crew dog is way more fun than
Hmm.
being an office individual while you deploy because they have those as well. But flying on a crew, man, we used to say it was gym tan laundry because that's pretty much all you do. You'd go fly, you'd come back, you'd hit the gym, go to the pool, and then just do laundry and get ready for the next day. Some of the best friends that I have to this day, I roomed with or I flew with, and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of opportunities to make friends, but the camaraderie from going out there and doing the mission and having a common goal together is usually what what builds relationships and having that common interest, you all sit down and you learn more and you start to understand the weapon system from employing it in a real world situation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's awesome. I remember I went out to Nellis on my ODT, and I got to talk to fighter pilot out there named Boom. He flew the F-15, now flies the F-35. But he mentioned, I said, "How's deployment life? Is it really hard on you?" And he's like, "No, we have a great time." He's
yeah,
like, "We just go and fly 8 9 hours a day, and we come back and
yeah,
hang out, and then we do it all over again."
yeah. It's tough, but you have to remember that this was CENTCOM, which we had been established in for 20 plus years, right? So the
Hmm.
routine, everything kind of came to pass, and everybody got into I'm being repetitive here, but got into a routine, right? So everything was pretty set out. We had an established network. We had established flight routes and everything. That's not going to be the same in any
Yeah,
GPC conflict that may come.
going forward, yeah.
Yeah,
All right. So how do you prepare cadets for the challenge of deployed life and real world operations based on your own experiences?
that's a good question.
Yeah.
So um, I guess I want to prepare you guys for the rigors of the military life itself, right? The military, much like the university, has a lot of bureaucracy that you're going to have to work through. Additionally, there's a high amount of stress that comes with going into the military, and even higher amount of stress being deployed. I know that the field training environment and AETC and Home Center kind of want to move away from that stress. I'm of the belief that you guys need to experience that in a well contained environment in order to understand how you're going to react when
Hmm.
it happens. And what I want what I want to happen is when, and I'll use an analogy, when I squeeze you, i.e. when I put that stress on you, are you going to focus or are you going to fold?
Hmm.
And I want to give you tools in order to help you focus when that stress hits, right? Additionally, I talked about it at the commander's call. Um, I've seen leaders to this day who are scared to make decisions. And that is really a sticking point with me, right? Right, wrong, or indifferent, make a decision. And that comes from competence and it comes from confidence in yourself, right?
Hmm.
And those three things that I brought up that I want to try to instill in the cadets here: humble, credible, and approachable. Right? Those are things that we preached at the weapons school. Those are things that the Air Force preaches at the weapons school. So you can be confident, you can make decisions, but the biggest one there is humility, right? When the decision doesn't work or the decision's wrong, you have to own up to it. You have to admit that it was wrong, and you have to course correct in
Hmm.
the future if that decision comes around. Accountability, being accountable for the wrong decision that you made, and credibility. It's okay to say I don't know,
Yes, sir.
but I'll find the answer, right? There's a lot of stuff I don't know. and you don't know what you don't know. So until somebody asks you the question or until a situation arises. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but what I want to do is basically send you guys into the operational Air Force with the confidence that you'll need to be good leaders, right? And
Yeah.
you'll gain more from the captains that mentor you, from the majors that mentor you, the individuals that have been in the career field that you're going into for years. But what I want are honest individuals who are humble, credible, and approachable. And I know it. I know I'm not the bluest officer in the Air Force, so I know integrity first. But what I like to say is always tell the truth, or at least try not to lie. Right. So
Yes,
if
sir.
you make a decision, you make a decision based on the information that you have. There may be something that you didn't know when you made that decision. Just own up to it, because you you owned up to what you knew at the time.
Yes,
If
sir.
that makes sense.
Makes complete sense. I mean, that reminds me. One of my favorite books is that had some of the most impact was it's Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Have you read that book, sir?
No, I know Jocko though. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
seen
that was
some of
pretty
his
awesome.
stuff.
His
Yeah.
podcast and stuff. It's pretty cool. But in his book, Extreme Ownership, he talks about that as just owning up to those mistakes
Yeah.
because the worst that can happen is you gotta, you debrief it and see where you went wrong and don't make that mistake again, of course, right?
Yeah.
Once you learn, but and then the character development too, and that's something that actually surprised me when I first got into the ROTC was the focus on like good moral character,
Hmm.
and that's just something we stress here. And I mean, it's been with me through this whole is going on my fourth year now, and something that I strive to um, try and do excellent at. So
Yeah. And to that point, you have to make that's the only way learning happens is
mhm,
making mistakes, right? If you go
exactly,
through your entire career or your ROTC career and you don't make a mistake, then you're not trying hard enough.
exactly.
So,
And this is the place to do it, right?
yeah.
We've talked to a couple people. This is the place to do it right here at the Detachment. So stakes aren't as high, but definitely if your heart's racing a little bit here and there, maybe in front of PT or taking a leap of faith, that's where you want to be.
Yep.
So so getting acquainted with the debt. So as your first semester as detachment commander, how has the transition been for you so far, sir?
A little scary. So it's tough coming from something that you've known for 17 years. Tactically, operationally, I would say that I'm pretty good. But then you come in here and it's a completely different beast, a different animal. Trying to impart leadership on individuals, and we all have that. I'm not being self-deprecating or anything, but we all have that imposter syndrome to an
Mm-hmm.
extent, right? Am I really a good leader? So I was apprehensive coming in here because I didn't know a how to impart that onto cadets, and b am I going to set them up for success going into the Air Force, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to put good individuals, and I told the cadre, I was like, I'm not worried about numbers. We could go down to a small debt. We could, increase our numbers, decrease our numbers. What I'm worried about is setting individuals up for success, giving them the tools that they need in order to go into the operational Air Force, and making sure that the lieutenants go in are, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
of good moral character, confident and competent individuals.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, raising up that next generation.
yeah, yeah, and like I said, that's a scary thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're gonna ask you where you went, who was your deck commander, and then you name drop me, and maybe they know me, maybe they don't, but I just the fear is letting you guys down. That's what you don't want to. I don't want to do. I don't want to let the cadets down.
Yes,
The
sir.
Kent State or anybody else, I could care less about, but the cadets, I want to make sure that I'm giving you what you need.
Yes, sir. And we appreciate it. Thank you, sir. And then, uh, so this next question: what goals did you set for yourself and attachment when you first stepped into this role, and how are you working towards them?
Um, Goals. I don't know if I actually ever sat down and thought about it. Goals I set forward. I would say what I just answered would probably be my goals. You have to understand that while I'm responsible for the cadets, I'm also responsible for the cadre here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great opportunity to give them the time to spend with their family, right? So I try to afford them the opportunity to spend with their family because the operational Air Force is a beast, right? And
Yes, sir.
everybody has manning issues, and when they go back to the operational Air Force, they'll be back into those long days, weekends, deployments, stuff like that. So we try to do as little as possible on the weekends, but my goal, just like when I crossed over to become a officer, is to take care of the people the best I can. Um, Again, afford them opportunities. So you guys went on the canoe trip here
Yes, sir. That
recently.
we had a great time.
Yeah.
That was
So
a great weekend.
behind the curtain, that was a fight. That was a fight to make that happen,
Hmm.
and but we got it done. So it's I guess pushing where I need to push in order to get you the opportunities that you need, um, and not worrying about any impacts that come to me
Yes,
because
sir.
I'm done with my career after this. So
Seriously, leading on, giving it off to the next generation,
yeah,
and trying to afford us the best opportunities and stuff like that. I think it does make a difference. We had a great trip, time on the canoe trip. Really good morale building, and really kind of help build those connections with fellow cadets
yeah,
too. So yeah, that was
yeah.
a great time.
Pictures looked awesome.
Oh, we had a
Yeah.
great time. It was definitely awesome. Um, all right, so let's move into leadership and experience. So, what aspects of your previous leadership roles have been the most helpful in preparing you for this command position?
Uh, so I would say my time with the TACPs probably prepared me the most. The TACPs, when I was with the ABMs, most of them are officers, right? So most of them are in their 20s, late 20s. We all went through tech school together. We're all um, kind of on the same level. The TACPs, they were brand new enlisted individuals. They were kids
Hmm.
basically, and they made mistakes. So I as a DO, I got to deal with that. I got to talk to them, mentor them. I had an open door policy with them, and I built great relationships with them. So I would say that the relationships that I built and the interaction I had with that younger generation probably helped me come here to work with you guys who are roughly the same age, so that I knew how to interact with those individuals because you guys speak a completely different
Yes,
language.
sir.
So and it's hard because every generation is different, right? They see things different, they do things different. Uh, Different things are important to them. But I will say that I've had a lot of leaders who have actually taken the time to listen to everybody that has come forward and talk to them. And the biggest thing that I can tell y'all is take that time. Even if you don't have it at that moment, seek that person out that wanted to talk to you because it may not be important to you, but they took the time to come see you and they wanted to talk to it, so it's important to them.
Hmm. And that makes sense.
Yeah,
That mentorship aspect you mentioned too, is probably a big part of people's success,
yeah,
and what they do. Because I know I've had my mentors so far, and I don't think I could have done it without them,
yeah,
right? Because we're so blind to what we do ourselves on our in the daily routine, right? You don't have that perspective, and you have to ask somebody else, or maybe you're making mistakes somewhere, and
yep,
you don't know how to overcome that. So you have to go to somebody that's a good mentor, and for the mentor too, you don't have to be a mentor, right?
yeah,
Nobody necessarily has to be a mentor, but it definitely is I guess a fulfilling endeavor.
yep.
All right. Talked about deployed life. So let's just get into our last topic here, looking ahead. As you move forward into your first year as a detachment commander, what long term vision do you have for this detachment and its cadets? Then we said a couple things about
We said a couple
goals,
things, right?
but long term.
But I told the cadre when I first got here, and this is my impression of how this should work. Um, it's not up to the cadre and myself to recruit. And what I mean by that is if we build a positive environment here where the cadets learn and grow and become strong leaders and people of good moral character, and they have a good time while they're here, then that recruiting will take care of itself, right? You all will talk to individuals. You guys will go out there and you will say that this is an awesome place to come, right?
Hmm.
And Kent State's a beautiful campus. It seems like a great school. I haven't really had much interaction with all the departments, but I want Kent State ROTC when it's talked about to be a place that the cadets were like, yes, I learned a lot. There were good leaders there. There were people that took care of us, and it is absolutely something that I would do again, and it's something that I would recommend anybody come through and do. Take the classes, even if you don't want a commission or something like that, because I feel like the word of mouth or the experience that y'all have here is going to help the organization much more than a bunch of old crusty lieutenant colonels or majors or tech sergeants going out there saying, "Oh yeah, it's a great place," right? You
Yes, sir.
know, we have to say that. You don't have to say that. But if it is a good place that you want to come to, then I feel like it'll be a good organization and more people will want to join.
Yeah, and I think that's something I've definitely seen in the past ever since I started. Um, you know, the POC are definitely a lot more personable, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's that connection between the GMC and the POC that we didn't have before with things like POC office hours. The trip this weekend was a lot less locked off because everything we did was always just a locked on environment,
Yeah.
and then that just kind of bled into the locked off environments where it was like this big chasm between GMC and POC, and it's really hard when you have GMC. They're like, why would I want to hang out with stuck up
Yeah.
upperclassmen who just are just in it for themselves? So
Yeah. And you just have to bridge that gap. It's a
exactly,
sine wave, right? It ebbs and flows with the personalities of who's in that position at that time. And it ebbs and flows with the personalities of the individuals that are cadre as well. So you just have to break down those barriers, and sometimes you just have to have the discussion and talk to them because you may get POC that are like that again, and that bridge, that gap or that wall comes up again, and you just have to kind of break it down and get people talking to each other because
hmm
you guys are all in this together, right? Just
exactly.
because you have some position in the wing doesn't mean that you're, you know, respect doesn't come from your rank. Respect and leadership comes from what you do and what you say and how you act. It doesn't come from your rank.
Yes, sir.
So,
So I get behind that for sure. And it makes a difference in that person on an individual level too.
yep,
So when you walk into PT and feel like you're a part of something, I had some discussions with cadets over the weekend that said, "Wow, this is like just a big part of my social pillar now,
yeah,
right?" And if you just, I mean, that's some of the stuff that kept me in too, right? Just having
yep.
great friends around me, and so it's
And
very important.
that's something we discussed as well, like for NCOP and stuff like that, because you got when people come here as freshmen, they're coming into a brand new world, right?
Hmm
They lose their friends from high school, they lose their friends from their neighborhood. It's a whole new ball game, and they're walking into a world where they have nobody. And this organization, as long as it's open, gives them a starting point to make friends and make connections and a jumping off point, so they're not as isolated when they first come into the
Exactly.
college world.
Exactly, and it's tough, especially probably for a lot of people outside an organization or not a part of. There may be commuters and that's tough for them to even probably stay motivated in an environment, school environment, and then also like an environment like this does push you to do better. And there's resources here and people to talk to, whether it's for class or whether it's for like I like to fly planes. There's a lot of people here that are more than happy to help me out with my check ride, right?
Yeah,
So stuff like that, it's awesome to have here. So, um, just into getting into our last question here. So what advice would you offer cadets who are considering long-term service in the Air Force or military in general?
grow thick skin and don't be afraid to be offended and offend somebody else. Um, there's going to be people that say things to you that you don't like. There's going to be opinions that you don't like. There's going to be decisions that you don't like.
Hmm
So I always told the individuals that flew with me, if I made a decision that they didn't like, they get two pushbacks. If I say it after the second pushback, then we're going with it.
hmm
Because you had to give them that ability to say something because they're I'm very keen on the fact that there are things that I miss, right? And when they push back and they tell me what I was missing, I'd be like, oh yeah, I didn't see that. So, but thick skin, people are going to offend you. Get used to it. Um, but don't be afraid to offend and speak up when you think something's right. If you're going to stay in it for the long haul, right? Because that comes back to the making the decision thing. When you get to a higher rank and things are up to you and decisions are on you, then you're going to have the moral courage and the strength to say what you need to say and get people going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. All right. Well, I think that does it. Is there any other closing remarks you'd like to say, sir?
Oh, no, no, that's it.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast. We
Appreciate
really
having me,
appreciate
bud.
your time,
Yep.
sir. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.